Hello everyone and welcome to the Athletic HQ here in London. This is the Deal Sheet Live. My name is Adam Leventhal, journalist and broadcaster from The Athletic. We are here because it is deadline day in this January winter transfer window and we have under 6 hours to go. And we have a great show for you lined up on YouTube, on TikTok and on X because I have a wonderful panel alongside me. Would you like to meet them? Yes, you would. Let's first introduce the Athletics football correspondent, David Ornstein. How are you, David?
Truthfully, I'm struggling a bit.
You are?
With seasonable lack of health.
Is this the transfer window flu you get?
Transferitis?
Yes.
It's already made its debut on this programme previously,
yes.
Before the turn of the year, and it's come back with a vengeance. But we soldier on.
We do indeed. Alongside two wonderful people who are going to help us analyse the various moves that have happened, some of the deals that we don't necessarily know about yet. They are two men that you are very, very familiar with, of course, leading tactical analysts and presenters, influencers, Jon Mackenzie and JJ Bull. Wearing yellow, JJ.
I sure am.
Is that deliberate? Sort of a Jim White sort of tribute act you're pulling together individually?
No, hadn't thought of that.
No.
I mean, actually, yes, it is. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I thought I would buy into the transfer window day of old.
Yeah, I like it.
Yes.
You look great.
Thanks.
So, what I wanted to just flag before we take you to some of the latest transfer news is that if you want to interact with the show over the next hour-ish, do get your messages in, join in the chat, and we'll get to your questions a little bit later on. So any questions you want to ask to Jon, to David, to JJ, do let us know. But let's start with David because it may well be, you may well remember last summer, he might need to pop in, might need to pop out. It's not to blow his nose, it's to get transfer news. So let's get to you, David. What is going on right now? What's sort of top of mind for you at the moment?
Oh, there's a few things.
Yeah.
Probably Mathys Tel.
Yeah, let's start with him.
Yeah. So the on-off saga of the January window. The latest news is that he has travelled over to London ahead of a proposed move to Tottenham, after all, who, of course, he turned down.
Yeah.
Was it a few days ago or at some point last week? But now they're in a strong position to get a deal done. We don't know the exact structure of it. It would appear to be a loan, but that hasn't been finalised yet. And the whole situation is not done, so we've got to be careful. But they are trying to get it done. Nobody else appears to be in the race, and it's getting late for anybody to trump Tottenham. Earlier in the day, it seemed he'd be staying at Bayern Munich for certain, which is exactly what he told Tottenham when he turned them down. He professed his love for Bayern Munich and said he wants to continue there, reassess the situation in the summer. Then all these stories came about saying he was considering Manchester United and that Arsenal had looked into it. Manchester United did explore a loan. Arsenal considered him like they consider many options. They discussed it internally. There's a bit of contact with his representatives, nothing advanced. And then it all seemed to have sort of fizzled out today. But then, boom, suddenly he was on a private jet over to the UK. And hope springs eternal for Tottenham fans. Any
indication as to why there was that sort of to and fro or not?
Well, we don't know exact reasons. There's clearly a bit of persuasion on behalf of Tottenham.
Yeah.
We hear that Daniel Levy, Johan Lange, Ange Postecoglou have all played a really important role in swinging this back from where it was when he turned them down. On his part, I don't know, a bleak picture at Bayern Munich for the rest of the season where he's not really been playing so far and perhaps that was going to continue. The knowledge that he needs to get out and play somewhere, a feeling that it's not quite worked out as much as he seems to have an affinity with Bayern. And yeah, there'll be, other sort of circumstances around it in terms of what playing time Bayern could have given him. But there's also a lot of people involved in these situations with a lot at stake, from agents, representatives, intermediaries, pushing in one direction or another. Because just like Tottenham were told by him, I want to stay and assess my position in the summer, there were other noises coming out in recent days from various credible reporters saying he was really keen to join a Man United, or the other clubs were interested in him, and they'd been given hope by his representatives. This is one of the most, not murky, but sort of opaque situations that I can remember in the transfer market. And so for that reason, you don't want to say it's concluded just yet.
Yeah.
There could yet be twists, but certainly Tottenham are trying to get it done.
And he's here, he's in the country.
Yeah.
It should be kicking on.
We believe he's in England, yeah.
Yeah, okay. John, just very quickly on Tel, tell me what you know.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth saying at the beginning, whenever there's January transfer activity like this, there's always a gamble involved either way, right? So you're not going to make your sort of perfect signings in January.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be an element of risk, I think,
Sticking
involved
plasters.
with that. Yeah, exactly. And as we know, Spurs have a lot of injuries at the moment. They also are looking for players who can play across that front line. And Mathys Tel has been used across the front line at Bayern. He's used primarily as a striker, but also as a wide player as well, in the same way that Spurs use their front three as well. So I guess the idea is, to give themselves another option there. And I guess the question is where he will play best, because obviously he's not going to probably be the starting striker, which means that the wide bursts are probably going to open up. And there are questions about how functional he can be in those wide areas. But yeah, it's one of those ones, I think, where you kind of think he's there, he's available, he wants to come, and let's see if he can give us a little bit of a boost to the period when Spurs have got quite a few injuries.
Yeah, because they're missing Brennan Johnson, missing Solanke. David, you just sort of perked up like a meerkat. Have you got something to say?
No, there's bad news for Manchester United being reported. We haven't confirmed it yet, on Lisandro Martinez,
right,
and a possible ACL rupture, which would compound a pretty bad 24 hours or so for United on and off the pitch. Of course, many of their supporters thought they were getting Mathys Tel. They're not. They suffered a bad defeat against Crystal Palace, and clearly Lisandro Martinez went off the pitch in some real discomfort, and some reports emanating from Argentina suggest that he could have torn his ACL, so that would be pretty brutal if confirmed.
We'll have more news on that maybe within the hour whilst we're with you on the deal sheet live. But you brought up Manchester United, David. Let's get stuck in to them. In this window, I know I didn't talk to you, JJ, about Tel, but it doesn't matter, does it? Right. Let's talk to David about Manchester United in terms of what they've done so far in this market. And there's nothing additional bubbling over the next sort of 5 or so hours, is there?
Not that we know of.
No.
And to be fair, United were expecting a quiet day today. There were lots of possibilities explored, such as Christopher Nkunku. They made an inquiry to Chelsea yesterday, as I understand it, about a loan, having previously explored a permanent deal for him, which would have had to be done at a price that they weren't willing to go to in terms of Chelsea's valuation. And it would have required somebody like Marcus Rashford to be sold to free up the finance to be able to do so. So a loan was not on the agenda for Chelsea, nor for Nkunku himself. Joao Felix is a player. Were they linked with him? I could be muddling up names here, so forget about that one.
We'll come on to Felix or Felix in a minute.
So there was, Manchester United looked at various different options coming towards this deadline, but there was nothing ever sort of advanced or concrete. And so there was a bit of frustration inside Old Trafford, because when you see the Tel reports that United are on the verge of signing him, which don't correlate to the reality, they're in conversations and they're expressing interest, it then creates a perception in the outside world, externally, among the fan base, that we've got signings coming in, and clearly they do need reinforcements if they can get them.
But it looked as if it was balancing out with, okay, Rashford is going to Aston Villa. Are we going to get someone in to replace him? A new attacking option.
Yeah, but I think that would make sense, and they would have liked to have brought somebody in, having created that space not only in the team but on the wage bill. However, I think the Rashford situation in their mind was dealt with in isolation.
Yeah.
We need to move him out. He needs to move out. And he wasn't part of the squad anyway. So it's like he was separate. It wasn't a sort of one in, one out type thing. If you think about it like that, he wasn't in the squad, so bringing one in would have created an extra player. And the priority for Manchester United is going to be the summer again, where they're going to need to rebuild in whatever circumstances they're in terms of competitions, finances, etc. So it's a tough time, but even when Ruben Amorim was appointed, he was quite clear that he didn't expect much activity in January. They've done a bit with Patrick Dorgu signing at left back, and we can talk about him. But beyond that, it was really about trying to clear some bodies out, trying to get rid of some players that they didn't really want to be there. So we include Anthony in that too, to get some game time under their belts, to shift some of the salaries. So that helps the financial position, to try and rebuild their value, perhaps in the case of Rashford for a subsequent sale. There's an option in the Villa deal at 40 million.
People got excited today about, on Garnacho posting on Instagram saying, I'll see you later on in the week or something. So Garnacho wasn't departing, Mainu wasn't departing. Because I know you mentioned that, throughout this window, that was one of the things that you did mention. It's like, none of these players are off the table in terms of potential sales because of the profit.
Exactly. So if offers had come in that United had felt were reasonable, they would have considered them for players across the squad, including the likes of Garnacho and Mainu. That didn't happen. There was interest from Napoli in Garnacho throughout the window. Chelsea made an inquiry for him as well. But nobody came in a concrete manner anywhere near what Manchester United would consider to sell Garnacho. And at the same time, he was becoming an increasingly important part of the team. He's started most of their recent matches since the Manchester derby where he was dropped. Mainu, again, has his form has been excellent on the whole. And we were clear when we reported that it wasn't that they wanted to sell him or they were actively looking to do so, but the realities of their financial situation mean that most things are on the table, apart from, say, an Ahmad who was signing a new contract, or a Lenny Yoro who's just joined and is seen as a bit of a generational talent. So it's a difficult moment at Old Trafford, but they were clear they're not under PSR pressure right now for this window. They're okay. There are normal profit and loss concerns at United. Just look at their financial results. And there may be PSR problems on the horizon that they'll have to cut their cloth accordingly with. But I think this was more about a window to get their house in order, to prepare for what they hope will be a better new era under Amorim, where he will be able to recruit and build a squad to his liking, because what we're seeing now is far below where Manchester United expect to be.
We're going to talk about a couple of other signings in a moment. One in at Manchester City, a potential departure at Chelsea, Spurs and their search for a centre-back. I know we've been talking about Tel going to Spurs, but I wanted to talk about their centre-back issues. But just a question that's come in. Let's get to someone from the chat. Momin Shaoib, he has said, please just let me know, David, presumably. Just let me know, Arsenal, have they given up on the window? Are they going to be doing anything?
Not to our knowledge.
No. That's it.
They explored
look at
plenty
all
of
the
options.
comments. What are you doing
I'm sorry
to us?
to let everybody down.
To us? This was your moment.
It's not my fault.
Can you not just make it up?
And
that 5-1 victory yesterday, it sounds weird to say, but probably the worst thing that could have happened to Arsenal in terms of their fans wanting a striker or wanting another option.
Yeah. Well, I think you firstly got to say results like that show that they've got very good players who, when they finish their chances, are more than capable of carrying the burden. Of course, they would like to have added to their resources, and that's why they were exploring the market. But apart from the Watkins situation, where they sort of expressed an interest at around £40 million, Villa would have been looking for something like £60 million to consider it before making the decision to go with the Duran sale. But other than that, there was never any realistic chance of getting a Benjamin Sesko, Alexander Isak, or or anybody else that was linked with them. And they would have been aware of that in this window, because Arsenal's big focus is the summer for the striker department. And if there was an opportunity that they could have brought forward to now, then I'm sure they would have tried to do it. But there wasn't. And I sense relative calm inside the club. Look, they know it's a gamble. The stakes are high here. They've got a really important second half of the season, and there's no guarantee it will go to plan now they've done what they're doing. But there's no guarantee it would have gone to plan if they had bought somebody in terms of form, injuries, results, so many unpredictable factors. It does add the pressure onto them for the summer to deliver, whoever that may be. Now, Mikel Arteta loves Alexander Isak, but it's going to be so expensive, if it's even possible at all, to get him out of Newcastle. They certainly don't think he's going up at Newcastle.
How much do we reckon he costs? 150? 200?
That's the number that's floated around,
150.
but by who? Like, it's a figure of imagination, because Newcastle...
But that sounds about right, doesn't it? 150.
To who?
To me?
Yeah, well, there we go.
Is that all right?
So,
Well, no, let's take
No,
it.
but
How much do you think he's
Yeah,
worth?
150.
About 150?
Yeah.
How much do you think he's worth?
But this
David?
isn't an auction. Like, we're not Sotheby's.
No, but how much do you reckon that's about? Do you reckon that's about right? 150 in current market value?
Between 100 and 150.
100 and 150? JJ?
I mean, Transfermarkt have him down as market value 75 million euros.
Yeah, but
His market
come
value.
on, Transfermarkt, come on.
It was a lot of money, isn't it? It depends.
So you reckon between 100 and 150?
I just think...
Fair valuation.
I think Newcastle don't have any intention of selling him.
No. And what they do in terms of potentially qualifying for the Champions League will obviously play a big part in that.
Yeah, and so that's obviously important. But the Saudi-led ownership will have him at the heart of their plans, which makes somebody like Benjamin Sesko far more realistic. He's not got as good a record so far as Isak, but he's younger and he's got huge potential and qualities. Now, Arsenal have done a lot of work on him. They probably won't be the only team in for him, but I do think he becomes, one very high up in their focus. Will they revisit the Watkins situation? He'll still be 29 because it's a December birthday, I think, and the affection that led them to make the offer or approach now doesn't just go away. But let's see, maybe that ship sailed. We'll have to see what the next months bring. But they were linked with Tel as well, and you can only go on what you report and respect what others say. But my information was that Tel there talked about a little bit internally. They'd been offered the opportunity to go forward with it. I think there was some contact with the representatives to understand the situation, but not a great deal more. Mikel Arteta didn't just want to bring a body in, and I think that's what he might have been in the sense that he's not a striker, a number 9. That's what they were looking for. So you bring in a sort of wide attacker when that isn't necessarily what you were looking for at this moment in time. And he's 19 years old. He's not been playing really for Bayern Munich. Arsenal have a lot of things that people want them to deliver on now and win at this moment in time. So I think it's bold, like Liverpool have shown in recent times. If you're not sure about something, then don't do it and keep your powder dry and then back yourselves to deliver. That's on them now and Mikel Arteta. And then see what you can do in the summer.
Quick one from you, JJ, on the Arsenal situation. If you were Mikel Arteta or the powers that be at the Emirates, would you have found a striker and done that bit of business now to give you the best chance of winning the league? Or do you agree with what David said there, that January isn't necessarily the best market to operate in, and now isn't the time if you don't really believe in it?
Well, I mean, there's no point bringing... this is what everyone says. There's no point bringing someone in if they're not better than what you've already got. And the ones who are better than what they've already got are the super elite ones who cost hundreds of millions of pounds. So, is it actually worth bringing that in? Is it going to make a difference? Is it going to gain you the 9 points difference, whatever it is, between them and Liverpool? You don't really know. You might still achieve your goals this season without doing that. Goals, pun not intended, but it was good.
Very good.
You think the thing to do if you're really competitive and really just shooting for the stars would be bring someone in, but there's no way that their scouting department and analysts and everyone do not already have every single potential striker in the world listed in order of who they'd want to sign first. Then the things like, say, I think I read that Dusan Vlahovic might not sign or might not renew his contract at the end of this season. Is that right? Maybe then. I'm not sure. I thought you would know. I don't know why.
Sorry.
Vlahovic was in the mix, wasn't he, at some point?
Arsenal went for him previously, historically, a couple of years ago before he joined Juventus. They weren't in for him this window,
Yeah.
there were reports that Arsenal were in for him, but again, my journalism suggests that was never the case.
Yeah,
Right.
no, that's fine.
So that could be a thing, because if whatever I read elsewhere has anything to do with it, with not signing a contract, might be worth less. So they could get him in the summer for much less. And if you're aiming, I guess, what your aims are, what you want to achieve versus how much that costs. If it's going to cost you this much to get you something that earns you this much, what's the point? Because they're businesses now. They're not really, we think of them as football clubs, but they're businesses.
I think it's interesting to see that the teams who aren't doing business in this window are the teams at the top of the league, your Liverpools and your Arsenals.
Yeah.
The teams who are doing a lot of business are Man City. We talked about Spurs. We talked about Man United. Teams who are struggling with either injuries or performances or both. So I think it's clear that if you can get all of your, what do you say,
Ducks in a row.
Ducks in
a row. Yeah.
You want to get into that summer cycle, right? You want to be planning for the future, and you don't plan to make signings in January. You plan to make signings in the summer, which is when contracts run out. Everything's a lot easier and a lot cleaner.
Nice little segue there, John.
Thank you.
Let's talk about two of those teams that are wanting to do business, and you mentioned them there. Let's deal with Nico Gonzalez, Porto to Manchester City. David, what's the status on that? Is that just gradually moving towards a conclusion?
Well, before we started recording this, we reported on The Athletic that he was undergoing his medical in Portugal ahead of this proposed move.
We're live, David. We're not recording.
No, did I say record? Apologies.
We're live.
Well, you sort of do press record when you start a camera.
Play and record, yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Thank you, JJ.
Yeah.
So undergoing a medical,
Yeah.
60 million euros is the fee. I think that's around the release clause in his contract. City were looking to pay below that, but this is a player they've identified for this 6-8 role in central midfield. They were looking for, and we talked previously on the show about Douglas Luiz being a possibility, and we said that he wasn't the only one. They had a thought, City, like we can just go for somebody in Rodri's absence, but how many people are good enough to come in and available at this point in time for that short period, and then he'll be back, or do we bring in somebody that can be here longer term, but they can't be exactly the same as Rodri because he's coming back? So they needed to try and find somebody that was really sort of ideally young enough, longer term, and different somewhat to Rodri. And I think they feel they found that in Nico Gonzalez, 23 years old, Spanish, former Barcelona. There's a sell-on clause to Barcelona, so they'll be quite happy with this deal. It's going to be a long-term contract. The last I heard, it wasn't fully done, but it's getting towards that point.
Who wants to tactical heads?
Me. I like Nico Gonzalez.
Come on then,
I don't know.
talk.
Well, I like these midfielders who are sort of kind of rangy, big, which is the Rodri mould. I know David said they're looking for something different, but actually watching him in preparation for this, I was sort of struck by how almost Rodri coded he is. He's 6'2". He's
Rodri coded.
You always hate it when I use words like that.
Rodri coded.
Yeah, as in like if you were looking for a
Like
player,
Rodri DNA.
Yeah, if you were looking for a player
Okay.
who was sort of like Rodri.
Yeah.
He sort of fits the
Rodri
bill, right? He's
coded.
got a Spanish
As
kid
you were.
coming through.
Yeah.
We saw what happened with Rodri. They brought him in and basically changed the course of his career, made him into the player that he is. I think that's the same sort of idea that they've got with Nico
like it.
Gonzalez. But even, I guess the questions are, he's not really played in single pivot, which is what Rodri tends to do. Is the question here then, could we bring him in and get him playing well enough to be able to do that on his own? Do we see Man City maybe shifting closer to maybe a double pivot system in the future with the two of them together? But what I see from him, I like. I think the things that we talk about with Rodri, the ability to cover ground, defensive. He's got the physicality to be able to provide that. But also, I think in terms of his on the ball stuff, you can already see signs that he can do the things that Rodri does so well, which is receive the ball neat and tidy, move it on, keep his body open so he can move the ball either way, so you're not forcing your build up into certain channels, which means that teams can compress you more predictably. So I can see why they've gone for him.
And that's been City's issue from your point of view, because I remember Sam Lee used the phrase on one of the most recent podcasts that we did, the preview show actually. He called Manchester City's midfield a basket case.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of everything, isn't it? Like part of it is Rodri, and I think losing Rodri has meant that all of the problems that we've seen have been exacerbated in a way.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been as much if he was there. But like they need to have someone in that midfield who can offer some kind of mobility, some kind of physicality, but as well, I think whenever you hear Pep Guardiola talking about what's wrong with City right now, he's always clear in that saying that they're not able to keep the ball as well as they should be, and that that causes the problems as well, right? They want to maintain possession because if they have the ball, they're not defending, and I think the more you give up that ball, the more you then have to deal with these situations that they're clearly not very good at dealing with in defensive transition.
A lot of pressure on the new guy coming in, isn't there?
Yeah, but I think, exactly what John is saying is, I think exactly what they're going to do with him, because you can let him learn from Rodri when he's back. He can provide cover now and play, and he, like at La Masia at Barcelona, he was a 6 for a lot of the time, so he was that kind of player. In fact, he made his debut coming on as a sub for Busquets, I think, in the 21-22 season. I think I looked at it earlier. Might have that wrong, but that's pretty close to what really happened. But like lots of players that come through that academy can play any number of positions, so that's one of the things. And again, what John's saying with the physicality, we see a lot of him if you watch not just highlights, but anything when he's involved in a game for Porto, is that because he is tall and he is a holding midfielder, he's usually at the back. So when the other team ends up clearing the ball, he's really good at reading where it's going to go, and because he's tall, you can head it away. So you get a bit of the physicality. Just aerial battling is useful, especially for Man City, where you've got all these small little lads in the midfield. Put someone bigger in there, and sometimes you can look a little bit like I would say a maybe less mobile, maybe a bit harsh, but mobile version of Declan Rice, something like that. You can do a bit more box-to-boxy stuff. But I think he'd be great in that 6, and because you can do the 2 positions, you can then play him next to Rodri sometimes if you want, against a really good team, a really strong midfield. The pressure will be okay, he'll be all right. He's played for Barcelona and Porto, he'll be fine.
He'll be fine. Yeah, brilliant. This is the Deal Sheet Live. We are here at the Athletic HQ. We have a wonderful guest panel for you. JJ Bull, you've just seen there. Jon Mackenzie is here, and David Ornstein, the Athletics football correspondent and transfer guru, is with us. This section, we're sort of running on a little bit with it, but it is what could still happen. So we could probably slap that back up on the screen as I ask David the question, what are Spurs doing in terms of this search for a centre-back? Is Disasi to Spurs still a possibility?
Well, yes, in terms of the fact that Chelsea are open to letting him go. And it was Aston Villa who kind of made the first move.
Yeah.
They agreed personal terms with him, and he seems to have had his heart set on that transfer. However, Chelsea don't want to loan to Aston Villa. They see them as possibly their closest rival for Champions League qualification. They would potentially sell at quite a hefty price, which Villa don't want to pay. If they were to loan him, Chelsea want a significant loan fee that Villa are not prepared to pay. Whereas for other clubs, the loan fee is lower. And so that's kind of taken Villa out of the equation. Whether or not Disasi has accepted that is another matter, but he might have to get his head around it pretty quickly because we hear it's not going to happen. Tottenham reached an agreement with Chelsea. That wouldn't be a problem club to club, but Disasi has to want to go there, and he hasn't shown an inclination to so far. Whereas, the Wolves and others there who are maybe lurking in the background, ready to do something at short notice, but hasn't advanced just yet. So Tottenham are working on the Tel situation that we spoke about at the top of the show. They haven't taken their eye off the ball with another centre-back following the arrival of Kevin Danso.
Yeah.
But just as we came on air, I made some checks and as to how likely it is that Tottenham might do a centre-back. And it was explained to me by no means guaranteed. So that might not happen with everything they've got going on with Tel and everything they've done so far. But I would expect Disasi still to leave. Okay, it's possible it all falls apart and he has to stay at Chelsea for the next 4 months. But I would expect something to be agreed. It's just that Chelsea will agree with most clubs. Maybe not Villa, based on what I just said. But it's whether Disasi will. And he'll have to decide whether he's prepared to stay at Chelsea and just sit and not really play, or go out and get some minutes under his belt in the second half of the season.
I'll get a word from JJ or John on Danso in a moment, but on Spurs, obviously them still looking for a centre back is telling when you read between the lines. Obviously, Mickey van der Ven missed against Brentford. Obviously, they've got a big game coming up this week in the EFL Cup, the League Cup. Dragusin, Scan, worries about him. Romero returning is a slower burn than they would like. So they need to be in the market, and that's why they moved initially for Danso. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Who wants Danso stat pack?
We can share Danso.
Okay.
Do the same thing.
You can dance together on it.
Okay, he's a centre back. He's quite quick. He's quite strong. You can describe him as like a powerful centre back.
Yeah.
He can play through passes and through balls, but it's not his strongest point. It's being at Lens, isn't it? Is where he plays.
Yeah.
Austrian international, as far as I'm aware, is a good player. He's a good defender.
Have you got anything else on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a hard role to play, the Spurs centre back role. I think,
or anyone's been playing the centre back role at the moment.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I guess getting a centre back is going to benefit.
If you are a centre back, you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah, but I think again, you think of the two options that Spurs have been using when the system has been working, and you're talking Mickey van der Ven, who's just one of the outlier best defenders in defensive transition.
Yeah,
an incredible ball carrier. I don't know if you remember the goal that Spurs scored against Manchester United when he basically picked the ball up in midfield and ran it through. No one could stop him. And then on the other side, you've got Christian Romero, who's one of the best progressive passers in the world as well. So you're talking about a Spurs team, I think, where the question is, how do you get your backup centre backs to the same sort of level where the system doesn't fail as much when your starting centre backs are out? And that's the difficulty, right? They're having to shop in the January market to try and find players who they're going to represent both value, but also they're going to fit the system as well. So it's a really tricky one, I think, for Spurs. What they tend to do is prioritise like athleticism because of the fact that they do play with a high line. They tend to push their fullbacks go very high forward, which means that often you can end up with those centre backs exposed. You also, because they have quite a lot of positional rotations, the players can end up in different positions, which means that when you're defending those transitions, your teammates can end up in the wrong slots. Obviously, you want them to fall into this defensive structure, but if you end up with one of your fullbacks on the wrong side or one of your wingers is covering, sometimes we see their centre-backs having to move into wide areas, which then means the centre midfielders have to cover the box as well. It means that you have to do like a really varied role, and you also have to do a huge amount of decision making, which I think a lot of other teams will try and reduce the amount of decision making their players have to make in those moments. So it's a really tough situation. So yeah, I kind of feel for Spurs because they almost have an impossible task to find players who can fit those really, I think, high level of requirement in a January window. So I think Danso fits the profile we said, like an athletic player. He's going to be quick, so he's going to have that side to him. But Radu Dragusin fit that profile, and they've struggled with him at times in terms of their build-up. So it's not quite so simple as just being able to bring in players who are going to be able to make those long busting runs when they need to. You also need to have the technical quality on the ball to be able to do the build-up, which is partly why Spurs build-up, I think, has dropped off with these other centre-backs in.
David Ornstein, have we spoken about Joao Felix yet? I don't think we have. No. Have we? And Aphasia Chelsea has asked, why is Felix leaving?
He's not playing.
That is the answer to the question.
Yeah, I'm known for giving too long answers.
No, a lot of Chelsea fans will probably, or as things have maybe declined a little bit, have thought, well, maybe he should be playing more. I mean, in terms of his career and his movement, and you can give us the up-to-date news now, from Atletico to Chelsea initially, then to Barcelona, back to Chelsea, hell of a lot of movement, and he's on the move again to AC Milan.
Yeah, I mean, as a neutral in this conversation, I find him a very attractive player. I see him as a guy who is easy on the eye, great creator, but clearly the clubs he plays for don't quite feel the same because they're willing to shift him. Maybe his productivity and end product isn't as good. His all-round offering is not what these coaches want, and therefore he's on the move again to AC Milan. It's a straight loan, no option to buy. He will have his wages covered by by AC Milan, but when he joined Chelsea, he took a wage reduction from Atletico Madrid to make it happen. So I would imagine that's acceptable for Milan. And I think the loan fee package is worth around 5.5 million euros. which Chelsea might be quite pleased about. But yeah, I mean, you could say, why don't Chelsea use him more when results have not been as good? But they've somebody like Cole Palmer's superior, and you can't carry them both. With the lack of defensive.
He's been sort of earmarked for European games as well. He's appeared more.
Exactly. So I think it was probably in everybody's best interest to get him out and playing. But it does sort of continue a mysterious career somewhat, because there's such vast ability in there, but it doesn't seem to have found its natural home anywhere.
Is he a luxury player?
A tiny bit. He's a bit of a victim of how football systems mostly work now, because I would say he is like a 10 or a second striker. You need to give him the same freedoms you give to your very best player. But what you get naturally with players who are really creative and full of flair like that is they're largely inconsistent. So when he's playing well, he is one of the most fun players to watch that you can see. And he was amazing at Benfica, like absolutely amazing, just skyrocketed to stardom. And that's when Atletico came in with a huge bid, and that's when they got him. But of course, at Diego Simeone's team, you have to work really hard out of possession, and that was the thing that was keeping thrown at him, that he wasn't doing what he needed to. And so if you're one of the front players, really, you have to start leading the press, or at least do some of the running behind it. And while he might do it from time to time, I think you have to be doing it every single time and know and understand exactly when and why you're doing certain things defensively, which is just not his strong suit. So when you go to, again, a place like Chelsea, there's not really that number 10 position. It's kind of gone, really. You get it as part of a front 4-4-2 press or something like that, but largely you don't really get them. You tend to have two either side now of a box or something similar. And because of the way he plays defensively, you can't really drop him deeper into midfield because you lose too much. You can't create from deep. You want to get him higher up the pitch so he's in the more advanced areas. But then again, he just doesn't do that enough. And exactly what David says, you've got Cole Palmer's doing all of it.
Yeah. So
you can't really take away from that. And then the other side to Cole Palmer is you want someone who's more rounded, which is why you get Enzo Fernandez tends to be the other one in the way that Chelsea play, especially. And then you can play him in Europe because you tend to play in the competition they're in against slightly weaker opponents. So you can afford to have a player who maybe isn't doing everything all of the time. It's not that he doesn't work hard, he does. It's that some players who are like natural creators just don't see the defensive side of it or don't want to always do the certain thing. But if one player in that line of dominoes doesn't do it, it makes everyone else's job impossible, especially if you're man-to-man marking. So it's because of the defensive work, really. But yeah, I mean, if he was around in like 2005, he'd have been amazing. A bit like Riquelme or something like that, you know? Like a player you could actually enjoy watching all the time.
And he signed a 7-year contract in August of last year. So I guess...
So he's still dead young, right? So like in theory, he's not even at his peak, and he's not played all the time. Like he's nowhere near as many games played as he probably should have done, especially, what was it, 100 and something, 110 million, something like that he signed for Atletico back in 2019 he went. Yeah.
We'll see what happens with Joao Felix, but Chelsea fans won't be seeing much of him. Let me just let you know that we are here at the Athletic HQ in London. This is the Deal Sheet Live on deadline day. And we have, oh, look at that, we've got a clock up on the screen. Isn't that good? 5 hours and 18 minutes and 30 seconds to go until the window slams shut, as it does. And if you want to join somewhere which is a little bit insider, a little bit of sort of private knowledge for you, all you need to do is scan the QR code, which is going to appear as if by magic up on the screen very, very shortly, which is our special WhatsApp Insider channel. You get all the details from people like that man there on his phone. Look, there he is. That was good. That was almost as if you were updating the Transfer Insiders WhatsApp channel. So yeah, scan the code and join the channel. It's quite a group, isn't it, David?
It is.
You're in there all the time.
It is.
Popping bits of transfer gems in there.
Yeah. When I get the chance to look at it.
You are.
Yeah.
I think we need to get a lem sip for David Ornstein if we can, just to pep him up for the last five hours or so. We were talking about Chelsea before. Not going to be seeing Joao Felix because he's heading to AC Milan. Quick word about Ben Chilwell. That was a deal that was done over the last 24 hours, leaving Chelsea, heading to Crystal Palace on loan, and hoping to just play some football. Does it make sense for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's become unsustainable. He's a good footballer, a good guy, Chelsea don't dispute that, but he's not deemed right for their system under Enzo Maresca. Surplus to requirements, sadly. And so try and find a solution that suits all parties. He's been linked with many clubs since it became clear that he was on the periphery at Chelsea. But maybe London suits him, and Palace are in need of a sort of left centre-back with cover at left-back, if possible, and he can technically provide that. Listen, I don't know how much he's going to play that. I think they were looking at other options first. It wouldn't have come about if they hadn't suffered more cruel injury luck at the back at Selhurst Park. So even after those injuries, they were looking at others first, but it became a very convenient deal to do. There's good relations between the two clubs. They've had the interaction over Chalobah just recently that saw him return to Chelsea. And fingers crossed Ben Chilwell starts to sort of get his career going again. Just talking of Chelsea, we haven't mentioned that Nico O'Reilly is a player that they had been targeting. He's a 19-year-old central midfielder from Manchester City who is extremely well thought of in youth circles. And City love him. But, it's so difficult there with the competition for places. As Cole Palmer showed, some seek pastures new. And I think, there's a good chance Nico O'Reilly could have followed that path when Chelsea expressed an interest over the course of January. And it sort of came to a boil these last couple of days. And there were some discussions. There was a possibility of it happening. But Man City would have wanted a buyback clause. Chelsea would not have wanted to put one in. And that ultimately brought the situation down. He's going to be staying at City. And that's great news for them because he's got an extremely bright future. So there won't be a Cole Palmer Mark II.
Yeah,
for now,
exactly.
In this window.
Yeah, we don't need to sort of go over that again, but I guess it must be in their thinking. And I know that, circumstances dictated that he wasn't going to be getting into the City side at that time, so that's why they let him go, etc., etc., etc. But they must, in the back of their mind, think, we didn't get that one right, so let's make sure that we're 100% on this one.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And that is quite hard because you'll have boys at City, for example, who see the example of Cole Palmer and say, because a lot of people reacted to this news when it first came out, saying Chelsea don't need another midfielder, look at their options already. But you would have probably been saying the same about the wide attackers when they signed Cole Palmer, and look how that's worked out.
Yeah,
it's sort of survival of the fittest, and let's see, if they can shift others when they get a certain player they really want in. And maybe that would have happened in this instance. But so City, they're going to redouble their efforts to keep hold of these players. But they've also got players who are now seeing credible paths elsewhere to build their careers. He may now go back into 21s or whatever at City, which might be a bit of a come down for somebody that might have thought he would be playing at Stamford Bridge in a couple of weeks for the Chelsea first team. I'm not saying that's the case, hypothetically. So it's a really interesting dynamic and quite a lot of business going on between those two clubs too.
Yeah. Another signing that is confirmed. Obviously, David, give me a shout if there's anything that sort of crops up over the next couple of minutes, and you need to follow up on it. A deal that I wanted to speak to you about was Evan Ferguson heading to West Ham from Brighton on loan, and an opportunity in this obviously different area of the pitch, but an opportunity for him to go and get back on track scoring goals. And I'll get your thoughts on it in a minute, John.
Yeah, well, Ferguson is a player who the top clubs have taken a really close look at over a period of time that gives them enough confidence to have considered going for him. And I mean the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea and others. But then he suffered from injury, an ankle problem that is still giving his suitors concern to this point. And it's perhaps why others didn't come in for him on this occasion.
So is this almost a test case that other clubs will be watching?
I think so, and he's only scored one goal this season, and so it's given pause for thought. I love what I saw of him when he burst onto the scene, and he's got all the attributes. And when you speak to people, like his character traits are said to be very good as well. But West Ham became an obvious route because injuries to Bowen and to Antonio and to Fulkrug, Graham Potter taking over as manager, new Ferguson, and it feels a decent fit. The others were, tougher. Eintracht Frankfurt, was it Frankfurt? I'm thinking of Boniface's team.
Yeah.
Leverkusen. If Boniface was going to be going to Saudi Arabia, that didn't happen. Ferguson was said to be quite keen on that. Bournemouth were looking at him, but Evan Nilsson would have been coming back. And so would he have got the game time he wanted? Who else? Everton looking at him, but their financial situation meant that perhaps they couldn't offer what West Ham can. They're covering his full wages. And he might not wanted to have gone there. Fulham as well were a possibility, but they've got strikers. It's not like they don't have any. So West Ham is the test case, and they'll hope it works out well. And it'd be classic of Brighton and Tony Bloom if they send somebody whose value has fallen out somewhere, gets goals, gets games, rebuilds that value, and ends up being of great use to them, or to be sold at there or thereabouts the original price that he was being talked about just a year or so ago.
Do you think this is a good move?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it before. Often January transfers are described by risk, and I think in this instance, West Ham need to have a number 9, and Evan Ferguson is available, and could be the case, as we've said, that he has a high ceiling. He could get back on track, start hitting that high ceiling, in which case it's a win-win for West Ham, I'd say.
Let's get to a couple more of your questions. Unless JJ, you were giving me the eyeballs there. Did you want?
You're just there.
Did you want? You're just looking at me.
I can largely repeat what John said if you'd like me to. But I think,
no, don't. That would be unnecessary.
I like Evan Ferguson though. Like the thing is, he was really highly rated, like maybe a year ago, like really high. People have been linked with long-term, like big moves. I think.
Yeah.
And the injury's got, I don't know how it's knocked it out of him, but like you need to rebuild your confidence and momentum. It's really hard as a youth player, especially if you're going to play in Premier League, like first team. It'll be the same for like Mathys Tel. Where he's going to play for Spurs, don't really know if it's centre forward or left wing, because I don't think he's exceptional as a left winger and striker. He still doesn't, I don't think he has the, I guess off-ball movement and positioning to know how to hold up a team as the central striker. So see with Ferguson, who's more of that hold-up player, but I think he lacks a little bit of the off-ball movement as well to get and score the chances that you need. Like you have to be able to create your own chances by making the runs off-ball to score them. And a lot of his shots, Ferguson, are like long-range placed shots. It's the kind of thing he always does. Like he hits it with power, but he's placed always low. So what they've often had in the past at West Ham is wanting players like Mikel Antonio running behind. They can run into channels. They signed Fulkrug. That's obviously not worked really well. But now you've got a player like Ferguson who can give you something that can hold up play, link more, and let players run in behind. And when you have players like Kudus and that next to him, like a lot of speed next to him, he might be able to just drop a little bit deeper and do more of, I don't want to say Harry Kane stuff, but you know what I mean, like slightly deeper where you can link and not just be a target man, because he can probably be all round. But if it doesn't work quite so well and he's got all the chances, he's not creating them, then again, his confidence is not going to grow, momentum won't build. And so it's why a lot of players do well, I think, when they go out to like Germany or something like that, because you play against not always the best defenders in the league who are also massive all the time.
Wanted to just point out to people that if you want to keep posted on all the transfer news that is breaking from now through the deadline at 11 p.m. in the UK, do check out the live blog on this transfer deadline day on The Athletic. There's some quotes that have just dropped there from Marcus Rashford about his move to Aston Villa. And there will be the latest on Gonzalez undergoing his medical at Manchester City. The Joao Felix detail on his agreement with Milan. Crystal Palace rejecting a move for Spurs. Palace rejecting Spurs' Mark Gay offer, which was another subplot to their search for a centre-back. That's all on there at the moment. I wanted to get to another question. Thank you very much for interacting with us. We're live on YouTube, TikTok and X as well. Question on Nottingham Forest, because obviously they are doing very, very well, but usually in transfer windows they are busy and they can often take it up to the wire. Andrew Fotoeni says, is there a chance of Forest bringing in a forward? They don't need a forward. They've got Chris Wood.
Well, they've got a huge amount of firepower,
Yeah.
judging by their 7-0
They don't
win
need a forward, do they?
at the weekend. Maybe that's back to the Arsenal type dilemma. You've scored a load of goals, but everybody still wants you to strengthen. No, they have been looking at options over the course of the window, and You may remember they were linked in some quarters with like Mathys Tel from Wolves, which showed that it was a consideration. I broke the news a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, that they'd made an offer for Joao Felix.
Of course.
18 million rising to 22 or something like that. It was a deal worth £22 million, rejected by Brentford. And there was a sense that they might go back and get it done. They never did. And maybe they've realised that what they've got is sufficient for now. It's been quite quiet. We had the story overnight that James Ward-Prowse was returning from Forest to West Ham. He hadn't really played at Forest and is of greater use. That's in midfield. So I just think that things have settled down there under the Marinakis ownership. There was heavy investment at the start, very well documented. It felt at times a bit chaotic and like there wasn't much method to the madness. But this season has suggested that's not the case. And, a lot of the recruitment looks quite savvy. They did have a PSR punishment for their overspend. They contested very vigorously why they needed to spend what they did to get to where they are now, and it appears to have paid off. So not aware of Forest looking to do something in that position before the deadline. I think we may have reported that they may be looking at other areas, but nothing of the highest of profile for a team who are not really in need of much right now.
I just want to say Chris Wood to you to see what you say if I say Chris Wood to you. What do you say if I say
Chopper.
Chris Wood?
He's really good, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
I like him, yeah.
You're not going to slip into your alter ego.
No, I won't do that now.
You won't do it.
What about Lewis Carroll? Is that not a thing?
Lewis Carroll. That is a story that our colleague Jordan Campbell is reporting that may require your expertise. But I don't know if that's been published at the time we're talking about it live on air.
It has been published. Nottingham Forest, they're set to sign the Aberdeen team.
Tell us more.
This is the big story of the window, really.
16-year-old.
Yeah. I've never seen him play, but apparently he's been thought of very highly as a centre-back, so that would be a big loss for Aberdeen. We need to keep our young players and develop them into big ones to sell so we can compete. But now, obviously, that's not happening.
Sounds like you're singing Carroll's praises.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, there was a question I wanted to ask you both about deals that we haven't seen happen in this transfer window, and maybe ones that you would have liked to have seen happen, or ones that would have made sense. Because obviously, you do your sensible transfers and all that sort of whatnot ahead of transfer windows. Is there anything that you thought would have been good to have happened, even if it's just broadly for a club? Why haven't they gone and done that, for example?
I don't have a specific example of this, but one of the players who's really stood out to me this season was Carlos Baleba at Brighton. Yes. And I wondered whether or not City would see him as a solution to some of their midfield problems. Obviously, they've gone with Nico Gonzalez, but I'm not so much on wishing players away from their clubs, of course. But it's been a real pleasure watching his development over the last couple of seasons, in particular, because I think in terms of the on-ball stuff, he's got to a point now where I think he would be an addition to a club as elite as Manchester City. So it's always nice to see it when a player sort of comes in and you think, this sort of, you can see the potential here. But then when they realise that potential through the course of the season, I always quite like that. So,
JJ?
I, like many people in the chat, would have thought it was interesting if Arsenal had tried to sign, or did sign someone to play probably up front to try and give them that extra bit. In my sensible transfers, I thought Mathys Tel would have been a really good player for them. That was my sort of wilder one, but don't think that's been a story at all. That's just what I wanted.
Would Ollie Watkins have been good for them?
I find it interesting, the Watkins thing, because like we were saying earlier, he's 29, so he still will be next year, because that's how
he's 29 until he's 30.
Yeah, that's how age works.
And
the nature of time itself. Yeah, it goes on
this planet.
Yeah, well, it works slowly in places where gravity is different. To do with gravity and space-time. Watkins, regardless of planet, I think would be decent for what they want to do, because he can play across all the front. He runs channels. He's a really good forward, and I think he's playing at international level at the moment. So he would be something they don't have. Can run in behind. They don't really have that at the moment. So that would have been semi-decent. I think it's not quite there. I think if you're Arsenal, you're looking at someone who's probably between 23, 27 years old. So you can get them, that's the peak years, right? So Watkins, although he's great now, I don't know how long you'll get out of him, because he should still be decent, but a lot of what he's good at is being quite quick. And that's a really useful tool to have, which sadly for all of you who are under 30, what you'll discover at around 30 is that the speed you once had is no longer there. It slows down.
Yeah, but you can become a better player, as I have done in five-a-side, because of your brain. I think you're a better player when you get a bit older in your brain, aren't you?
Well, I think Watkins is probably already very, very close to being
I'm comparing a really, really footballer myself with an elite footballer. But do you know what I mean? You can be smarter as you get older.
Yeah, well, I think like what Arsenal should be doing is looking for the absolute elite to make them much, much better. And while I like Watkins as a player, I think like we were saying earlier, and it's so obvious, it's like Isak would make them like a proper next level team. So you're as well keeping your money involved just to actually go for that transfer, because that gives you the X factor. That means you can, when you're, the problem they have often is that they can't create chances. They don't want to take the risky pass. It's very defensive. They're very well organised. They're a really solid team. But if they have this player who makes the difference, I don't want to always compare what Arteta's doing with what Guardiola did and stuff. But like when you had Messi there, Barcelona could completely control the game. It could be just nil down, quite dull, 0-0. They have total control of the game. But then you've got a difference maker who can open it up. And those players are really rare and exceptional. And I think Isak is one of them. And either you tend not to get them at clubs who you could refer to as probably smaller than Arsenal. But he is currently there, one of the only ones in the world who can make the step up, and you can just see it. But there's very few players who are at slightly lower clubs. I mean, like where the league finishes, who can make that jump up now that are possibly available. So that would have been cool, I think. Yeah.
Last question I wanted to put to all of you: who would you say? And I know we have a few hours left, but who would you say has had the best January window, David?
Well, you don't know until they've played, and with the passage of time, we've said in the past people have won the transfer window and had a disastrous season. But who has recruited in the best way? I think by the end of it, if you look at the quality of, or the potential of the goalkeeper, the attacker, and potentially two defenders who might come in, it may come to be seen as Tottenham. Everybody would immediately think Manchester City because they spent the most money, but not necessarily. I really like Kinski. It's a baptism of fire. He's been thrown in at the deep end. I'm really intrigued by Tel if they get that over the line. Danso didn't do so well at Southampton in the Premier League, but he has done well at Lens. And then if they also brought in Disasi or another, then you've got to say that they've probably strengthened with their injuries, let's not forget, more than any other team. Okay. So let's go with them.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of put a measure on it, isn't it? And I guess if I'm being really boring, I'm going to say the teams that win the January transfer windows are the teams that don't need to do any business. So Liverpool, Arsenal.
I like that as an angle. Good.
Do you think that one works? Not too.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Because that's a big part of the transfer market.
Yeah, and like Liverpool in particular, I think the fact that they didn't do a huge amount of business in the summer as well. This sort of clarifies that they've had a really good season so far. They still don't feel the need to make those signings right now. And I think, the same with Arsenal really, is that the temptation for them would have been to sort of pull a lever somewhere, having had the start of the season that they had, but they haven't, and it seems as though they're starting to churn, and at least the hints of a title race are there. So I think clubs who don't feel the need to have to panic buy in January, they're probably the winners.
The hold your nerve and stay in your lane sort of.
Yeah, that's what I had to do in that answer. When I was like, no, this is not a good answer. But then I carried on going.
It was a great answer. JJ.
Well, I know David, who is the expert, has just said that most people would say Man City and then explain why Tottenham actually did have the best window. But I think it's Man City. I'll tell you why though, because I genuinely, and I know a lot of footballers. I've seen a lot of them written down. I genuinely haven't heard of some of these lads they brought in before. So everyone I'm hearing about, I've had to fully research from the ground up, which is really exciting. It hasn't been the case in football for a long time for me, and it's exciting to me because it's sort of changed, I think, what we can see scouts are doing, what analysts are doing. They're looking for value in places that the traditional way I would find players to recommend aren't there. They're not appearing on what I would look on, and I really like that. Like Huzanov, I've not seen him play before. So that's really interesting. And Matthias Reis, the Brazilian defender they brought in, never seen him play before. I know Nico because he was at Barcelona and I've seen him do stuff before. And then there's another lad I think they were either trying to bring in or have brought in who I've never also heard of. So that's really fun. I like seeing what City are doing and reacting to how it's going, because we've had them at the top of the table, top of the tree. What do we say?
Either.
Top of the table, on top of the tree, doing bits for so long that it's been what football is for a long time now. So to see it sort of change a bit and then go into January, bring in players to try and rapidly improve something that is clearly not working is fun.
I like that.
Thanks.
Message in from Chris in New Zealand says, not a question, just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the people of New Zealand. You're welcome, Chris. David, final point to you. Has anything changed that you can actually talk about that might have cropped up on your phone whilst we've been on air?
No, the only thing that might be disappointing to some Manchester United fans is that we're told that that's it for their business now. They're done on incomings. There may still be a departure for Tyrell Malacia, so that is a live situation. But in terms of potential signings, they're going with what they've got. They've obviously done some recruitment in terms of Dorgu and Aidan Heaven and Diego Leon, I think it is, at a sort of younger age bracket. But they wanted to be disciplined and not make the same sort of perceived mistakes that have been committed in the past. And we've talked about the sort of tight PSR limits that they're working to. As I said, they are compliant with PSR as far as we know, but money is in short supply, hence the cuts that have been going on across the club, and they'll be focused on the summer. So incoming business at Old Trafford for the January 2025 window is over.
And I was very lucky on an audio documentary that I put together for The Athletic, which is now out. You can hear it on The Athletic FC, all about the transfer window, to actually go and see David at home and meet his dog, Sparky, and talk to you about what it's like breaking a story. And I thought I'd just end on that, because there may well be other stories that are broken between now and the deadline at 11 p.m. in the UK, that just in general terms, the feeling that you get when the window closes, do you give yourself a little bit of a breather just to decompress? Because it is pretty intense, isn't it? Especially for you.
You don't know what to do with yourself. It's like it becomes your life and every sort of waking breath. But the chance to sort of relax a bit and to recharge and to get away and actually enjoy the matches without thinking about who's going where and the repercussions from a transfer sense is nice. But then we're just 4 months away from the end of the season, so very quickly, especially when you get towards mid to late March, April, plans are starting to ramp up for the summer. If you remember the Erling Haaland transfer, that was pretty much done and dusted in, I think, April, May, and announced when the window opened in June. So it's a bit of respite, but we'll love it, really. And that's what's kept us talking. We've done so much of this for more than a month now, and the public seems to be enjoying it and placing more importance on it than ever before, for good or for bad. It's an industry within the industry, and it's a sort of pleasure to work within it. So yeah, as much as it can drain you, as you can see and hear, we'll miss it when it's gone.
We will. But it'll be back again in the summer. David, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Indeed.
Thanks for having me.
John, thank you to you as well.
My pleasure.
And JJ in yellow, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thanks.
You're welcome. Just a quick mention on that audio documentary, if you want to go and listen to it, it's called The Anatomy of a Transfer. There's also an accompanying article online as well. We'll put the links up in the whatever's below. And to remind you that if you want to keep in touch with all of the transfer news up until the 11 o'clock deadline, check out The Athletic. The live transfer blog is on there. You've got the WhatsApp group as well, the insiders. You can either scan back and do the QR code. No, it's there. Look at that. What an interactive world we live in. So scan that code, join the WhatsApp group, and you will not miss any of the news that breaks between now and 11 o'clock. And this show is called The Deal Sheet, and we have been the deal sheet all the way through this window. Look out for teams that are going to take advantage of a deal sheet, which will give them extra time up until 1 o'clock in the morning to get their deals done if they're doing late business in this winter transfer window. Thank you very much for your company, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Take care.